Hey all, Max Cisneros here. Let me do the other glasses, not as much reflection. Oh, we can see each other. Max Cisneros here from the New Haven Pride Center, and I want to thank you for joining us. We are testing a new program here called StreamYard, and really excited about it. A lot of bells and whistles and places to potentially break things. So please bear with us. So you're joining us for Latino, Latina, Latinx, and COVID. And we are basically looking into the effects of the pandemic since March on the trans community, on the health of the trans community, on the effects and lives of those who are detained and undocumented queer folks who are detained and unemployed. So we're going to be going into that. We have three panelists. I'll get into whom they are and start asking questions. Also, I am more than willing to answer questions on the Facebook Live feed, which I am keeping up with, and because I'd like to get community feedback as we have this ongoing conversation. So before we begin, I basically just wanted to say that I'm Max Cisneros, a Latinx program officer with the New Haven Pride Center for the city of New Haven. And I'm really happy to be here with you to be able to talk about these issues. They can be a little difficult, but all the more reason why we should be advocating and speaking freely about them. So I also wanted to give a shout out to the New Haven Pride Center office right now, which is distributing food. And, you can't say there's ever a dull moment at the New Haven Pride Center. I got to say, today I got two programs coming out of the Latinx office. There's this one, and later today, between 4 and 5, there's Apoyo Latinx, where we provide a space for support and community building virtually for folks who may not necessarily feel like they're getting their celebrations at home. They're not being celebrated for who they are completely at home. So we created a space for us, for them. So that's going on from Latinx office alone today. Not to mention the food distribution that's going on in the office today also. So never a dull moment at New Haven Pride Center. I don't want to hear about anybody being bored, considering how much we're providing for you and for ourselves too. So I want to thank Patrick Dunn and the team over at Laura, JC, Maya. Everyone's working so hard. Ala, Miranda, and this team is just so amazing, and I feel so honored to be a part of it. So I basically wanted to be able to start out with a poem because I think culture and art is one of the ways that intersectionality becomes most apparent. And so there is a poem that really speaks to me, and it's by a poem by Mary Oliver, and it goes: you do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You don't have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. You can just do that. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you about mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese high in the clean blue air are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination. It calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of all things. So that was a poem by Mary Oliver. I read it years ago and it's touched me, and every time I go back to it, it says something different. So back to the conversation. I wanted to introduce our panelists, three of them, and I'm very honored and pleased to have them here. I feel like they uplift this conversation in different ways, and they're just happy that we can be together having this conversation. Our first panelist is Maya Lozada, and Maya Lozada is a community organizer. She is, I believe, the current LGBTQ plus commissioner for the city of New Haven, if I'm correct. And please push back and correct me wherever I need it. Also, I just wanted to thank you for being part of this conversation because I clicked the little star next to a profile whenever I want to see specific posts first, and your specific posts are just so outspoken and unapologetic, and I've been very served well by them because it lets me know a little bit more about what's happening in Fairhaven, but also the community at large. So thank you so much for that. Please, everyone, welcome Maya. I just want you to, if you could, give me a little bit of a your name, pronouns, and also basically what do you feel like is necessary to talk about in this conversation? What do you want to bring?
Yeah, so thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm very honored to be on this panel. So everyone who don't know me, my name is Mia Lozada. I'm from Hartford. I serve on the LGBTQ Commission for the city of Hartford. I've been doing it for a couple months and I love what I do because it's important to help my people in my community, especially queer people, because I feel like we're still being ignored. Our voices aren't being heard. And so it's a very, very important, not only me being as the person I am today, but to really, really represent my community. I'm openly trans, very, very proud of being trans. And, I just want to put that out there because it's very important to live your truth and be happy because you just don't want to be stuck in a hole because people don't understand or accept your lifestyle, right? So everyone is very supportive and I really am thankful for that. With the conversation I look forward to bringing out is, the access to trans health, especially like, operations, having access to hormones and this and that. Also reminding people that trans people are here and that we're going to continue, letting our voices be heard because I'm actually running for state representative in Hartford's 3rd district. And then it's very, very interesting. So I'm actually the first trans woman of color to run for this position. I've never heard or seen anyone who looks like me that ran for this position. So I'm very, very honored. But again, it's not all about me, it's about us. And when I do win, when I am elected to office, that not only the people, the voices of people in Hartford, but New Haven, Bridgeport, everywhere, the majority of the state, I will make sure that I represent my community. And so I just want to remind people of that because it's very transphobic, very homophobic where I live. And so very honored that I'm being courageous and brave about it. And I'm not using my trans identity as an excuse because again, I want people to really, really understand that no matter how you look like, how you identify, if you're part of our community or any type of community, just go for it. I want to see more people like me in office or any elected official office like council, state rep, Congress, and so on. So yeah, I'm excited.
Me too. I'm like, thank you again for being part of this. Like I said, your voice was something that I felt not only would uplift the conversation, but also necessary to get a finger on our pulse of what folks are feeling right now. So I appreciate you. And their pronouns.
Yep, pronouns are she, hers, y ella.
Yes. Bien, me da gusto oírlo.
Gracias.
Entonces, my pronouns are he, him, his, they, them, theirs. Lead by example. También quería introducir and also invite into the conversation is Jurg back with us? Is Jurg with us? Yeah, there he is. Hey, Jurg. It's good to see you, love. Jurg is the director of infectious disease in the Fairhaven Community Health Clinic. And I want to thank you so much for being part of this conversation as well. I think that it's important to have not just the voice of those who are being served, but those who provide services. And especially right now with all the changing environments and shifting procedures in the ways that we provide services, I think being able to keep up with this process is important, but also keeping in mind that this is a fast changing situation and being able to at least have a snapshot of what's happening now can be helpful for us to adjust into the changes into the future. So I want to thank you. I'm just going to want to ask you to briefly give a introduction about yourself, just your name, how to pronounce it, and also your pronouns, as well as any information that you feel you bring in necessary to bring into the conversation.
Okay, thank you so much, Max, and thank you for inviting me to this panel. I'm really honored to be here. Mia Lozada, it's very nice to meet you as well. My name is Jurg Oggenfuss. I'm an APRN, a nurse practitioner working for Fairhaven Clinic, and I've only been there 4 weeks, so I'm not new to the medical aspect, but I'm new to Fairhaven. So I'm really thrilled to be here. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm originally from Switzerland and have lived in the U.S. for 30 plus years. I did all my training here in the U.S., but I am a member of the community. I'm a gay man, and I'm open and proud, and I'm here to serve my community. So it's interesting. I kind of fell into this particular aspect of medicine. My first job out of school was at an HIV clinic, and that's where I first came in contact with my community and also the trans community. So I'm really pleased to be continuing this work. It's a passion of mine, and I continue to dedicate myself to my community and really want to. This is my life's work. This is what I consider my life's work. So really happy to continue that. So thank you again for having me.
Yeah, of course. Like I said, I picked up on that, how this is your life's work and your life's mission, really, and that also that passion, that dedication came through to me just in the first few conversations we had, and I also felt like it was a voice necessary to have here. Also, I'm going to put you on shout out right now. I'm going to put you on blast in that your mom is much like my mother, Mexican. So
Yep.
I wanted to put that out there to also let you, like, I brought you into this conversation knowing full well that 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 this is a Latinx space, and you showed yourself to be very respectful about it, and I wanted to appreciate and honor that too. So thank you for being part of it and also being aware of the kind of space it is. So thank you, Jurg.
Thank you.
And so our last panelist, certainly not least, is Luis Rios, who works at also at the Fairhaven Community. Hey, Luis, there he is, at the Fairhaven Community Health Clinic. And I met Luis. One of the first collaborations that the Latinx office had was with Fairhaven Community Health Clinic, in the conversations I was having with Luis about the work that we wanted to do together. And then this thing hit. I think that there's so many projects and ideas and things we were working on that we were ready and excited to work on, and then this thing hit. And then so being able to adjust and still work on the things that matter to us under this new shifting environment is going to be really important. And part of why I wanted Luis on this call was also because his insight is going to be incredible, as you'll see, but also because just because this thing hit doesn't mean that we can't work on the things that we wanted to work on prior. Just because this thing hit doesn't mean that we should allow it to be a barrier to the stuff that we think is important for our community. So it means a lot to me to have Luis here. And Luis, I'm just going to ask you, si por favor, nos puedes dar just tu nombre, tus pronombres, y also what kind of energy and feelings you would like to bring into this conversation.
Sure, and thank you for having me a part of the panel, Max. My name is Luisa Rios, and I am a marriage and family therapist who works at Fairhaven Community Healthcare. I've been there for about 5 years. Gender pronouns are he, him, his, sometimes a little gender fluid. So, I'm glad to be a part of this conversation with these folks. I did miss the first introduction with Maya, so my apologies. I was having some connectivity issues, but I'm glad that the signal's steady and that we can finally kind of make this conversation happen.
I'm glad too. So I basically wanted to thank you again for being here, but also kind of like acknowledge the space we're in. That this is a virtual space, and I think it's important to acknowledge how we got here. We probably could not have these conversations if it wasn't for trailblazers like Sylvia Rivera, like Marsha P. Washington, and countless other heroes and angels heroines that have taken part in our journey for us to be able to stand in our own power. So I want to acknowledge that. I also want to acknowledge personalities like Alan Turing, who basically won World War II and provided an ability for us to create computers so we can have these conversations. And by the way, he was imprisoned for being homosexual, and also died due to the treatment that they were giving him. So acknowledging the ways that we were able to get here and the personalities and the sacrifices that were made in order for us to have here, I think is really important. And so I wanted to give that energy out there appreciate our ancestry and really begin this conversation grounded in their sacrifice, in their love for us and our love for them. So having said that, I think that's really important. And also, I'm going to invite everyone to also join me in, I know it's a bit somber, but I think it's important, in a moment of silence for the folks that didn't quite make it. And that's broad, due to COVID, due to HIV, due to stigma, and homophobia and transphobia and all that. I just join me, please, in a moment of silence so we can acknowledge that. And then we go on with the conversation, please. Whew. All right, thank you, everyone. All right, so part of the theme that I had in mind for this conversation was a two-parter, like two themes rooted in the kind of stuff that I think that we should touch on. And those two themes to me really are about resilience and dignity. I think both of these things are things that we don't necessarily acknowledge for whatever reason. And the reason why they matter to me in this conversation is porque I think in this moment, many folks, and I've had conversations with Jurg and Lewis about this, and I'm going to ask you in a moment, Mia, what you think about this. But I think that a lot of folks don't recognize their own abilities, skills, and life experiences about how they've been able to survive certain scenarios, and really, like, in that moment, it may be difficult to appreciate and celebrate those skills. It only really happens after, like, oh yeah, I did that, I can do that. And so right now we're going through it now. We're in the thick of it now. So I basically wanted to be able to talk about the type of resiliency it takes for specific populations, specific demographics that know this suffering. We're not new to this suffering. We've experienced this in many different ways in the past. So this is not new to us. But the type of resilience that it takes in order to survive a situation like this, it means a lot to be able to tap into your own skills, your own abilities, your own life, experiences. So my question is, what life experiences have you had in the past that have benefited you most now in this scenario where we're trying to just be able not just survive but also provide what we know to provide, do the things that we know how to do in a way that we've known how to do them in the past. So I guess I'm asking here is, what experience in the past has benefited you specifically now to advocate for your community?
Well, I shall go first.
No, please, go ahead.
So basically, I started my transition in 2015, and I've never thought that I would actually live my truth at such a young age, because I grew up in a very, very, very strict Boricua, Puerto Rican household. And I've been kind of in and out with the situation of living with my parents when it comes to my mom and my stepdad. My mom had went to jail for a couple of years, and then my grandmother took over the custody for myself and my sister. And so ever since I kind of like got used to my abuela, I started knowing, like, I started to understand what was going on. And I was just like 8 years old, and I was just like, when's my mom coming out? I cried every night, and it's just like learning, what was going on. My grandmother took over. So long story short, I grew up in a very strict household, very Catholic, very, this and that. If anything, you're supposed to be the man of the house. And once you're the man of the house, you have to learn how to, take care of yourself. When you get married to a woman, that this is what you're supposed to do. So everything was kind of peer pressure, because I feel like my grandmother was trying to mold me into somebody that I'm not, knowing that I was very different at a very early age. I just knew that I was different, and I knew that I was born in the wrong body, but I wasn't able to express myself how I wanted to express myself, because I don't know what my grandparents would do. Would they disown me, or would I have to end up going to a different, lifestyle, as in, foster homes and this and that. So I kept thinking positive. I didn't want to really get into it too deeply because, again, I was very young. So getting into my teenage years, again, knowing how my lifestyle is really different from what my grandmother was trying to mold me into, like the cisgender lifestyle. I just knew that it wasn't me. And I told my grandma, like, listen, this is 2015. I told my grandma I've already made an appointment with my APRN, Katie Turney, to start hormonal therapy. And I told her, like, I'm going to live my truth. And if you don't accept that, then I can, find a way to, basically live somewhere else. So that way you don't see my transition as it, being uncomfortable. I want to respect her, but also I want to be happy. I told her I'll find a place at the park, Bush in a park. I'll find a place to sleep, so that way you can basically live at peace, even though if it was a lifestyle that she didn't accept. And then my grandmother said, no, you don't have to worry about that. And I literally looked at her. I was like, Grandma, I'm going to transition from male to female, and I'm going to live myself as a woman because this is who I am. This is me. And she's like, yeah, I know. And I literally didn't have the emotions because I was just so excited that I get to finally live my truth. And now knowing that my grandparents, well, my grandma especially, is going to be okay with it. My grandfather would say, oh, you're not leaving the house like that, right? And what I mean by that, I was in my wig, my female clothing, makeup, and he goes, you're not leaving the house like that, right? And I'm like, no, but I am. I didn't know how to answer that because I was very, very scared that to lose his love and trust and all the, things that my grandfather has shown me since I was little. My grandparents see me as I was their own child, and I see them as if they were my mom and dad. So, our relationship is unbreakable. And so having to do this was very, 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 very scary because I didn't want to lose a special relationship throughout my whole life, right? So that experience really taught me to be the activist and advocate for my community, because even if you grew up in a very strict Puerto Rican household, that you have to really sit down with the people you love and educate them. They're old fashioned, and I get it and I respect it because their lifestyle is way different from mine. So having this experience of, owning my truth and having the voice that I've never had, and I'm actually using it. And also I can use it to represent my other trans brother and sisters. Like, I really am proud of that because it took me years. Okay. It took me 25 years to say, I love myself. I don't need no man to love me. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't need nobody to tell me how to live my life. This is who I am. And if you don't accept that, then I'm sorry. I mean, I don't have to apologize, but then, you're not for me. So like that experience taught me how to really learn about my grandparents, especially having them live in a different generation, obviously, to really educate them because, ignorance it comes from lack of knowledge. If you don't teach people the knowledge they need to understand a certain lifestyle, then ignorance can slowly eliminate itself. So, it continues. People would call me, misgender me, and I would get mad, and I can't get mad because, again, instead of choosing anger, you have to choose education to literally educate people, because the more you argue and the more you let that negative energy out, it's going to be emotionally draining.
Yeah.
Why live in this universe, right? To fight for your right. Okay. Everyone should fight for their rights. But for someone who wouldn't really understand, it's just emotionally draining, and it's never going to keep you at a pace of satisfaction. If they don't like it, they don't like it, just move forward. And if they want to learn more about it, if they're curious, educate them. But you can't really just keep arguing with someone that's never going to understand. And so those experiences that I've lived through and still am living through, I just say, hey, you said something wrong. Let's talk about it. If not, then you do you, boo. That's it.
I think that process is so powerful that allowing it, like the way I envision it, is allowing a space so you can educate. And of course that's a working together, that's a collaboration. They have to be open enough, not tolerant, open enough to hear the message. Tolerance is just another barrier. have to accept that, all right, this may be an opinion I don't agree with, but it's one that I'm willing to hear. Just having that, just having those two, huge. You can do a lot with that. But
And I mean, if we practice that though, like if the more we practice, the more, I wouldn't say equality, the more peace we'll get, because I feel like this world is so full of, I wouldn't say hatred, but it's just people are just so ignorant. And I feel like what you said, Max, like, you know, I agree 100%. The more we practice that, the better we'll get, you know, for our future generation, for our future children, because the children that is in this generation now can be our next leaders, can be our next doctors, nurses. You know, it's all about how we really educate everyone. So definitely having a safe space, one, and not making people uncomfortable, because when people are uncomfortable, then that means they're not open-minded. But if we have more open-mindedness, absolutely.
makes a big difference.
I would throw in the word receptive also. I think that's really important. The open and receptive is really important.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that, like I said, partnership. It takes two to tango. So, but so let me bring that question to you, Jurg, and also rephrase it a little bit. In what ways you have noticed the ways you provided the life experiences that you had providing services have benefited you in the last few months? There's another version of that question I want to ask, but first let me just get to that one.
Okay, and just a reminder, it's Jurg.
Jurg, that's right. I keep doing that.
Jurg, okay. I know it's very tricky because it has a J and it throws everybody off. So I think I would second what Mia has been saying, and correct me if I'm wrong. It is Mia, correct?
Yeah, it's if people call me Maya, it's okay. At least it's you know, still in this umbrella. So yeah, it's
Okay.
Mia. But if you call me Maya, it's okay as long as.
Okay.
Thank you.
I want to be respectful of your name. I know all too well what it's like to have your name mispronounced. I want to honor that.
I mean, I feel like I'm the famous singer, Maya. You know, I don't know if you know.
I gotcha. No, thank you for holding each other accountable, though. I need that.
So I would second what Mia says. You know, I can only speak for myself, but I think we, as part of the community, we all have our story of kind of opening up the door a little bit and saying, okay, this is the real me. I want to come out. I want to be myself. I want to live my life on the outside the way I feel on the inside, whether that's transitioning or whether that's being openly gay. So I think the bottom line is that it really comes down to self-reliance. We can rely on ourselves for sure, right? We've all heard that saying that the only person you can truly rely on in this world is yourself. And I think in this particular venue or subject matter, I think it really boils down to, yes, I can rely on myself. I'm okay the way I am. This is who I really am. And this is my truth, like Mia was saying, is so important. And so in that aspect, it has helped me to become a better provider, because I know what it's like on the receiving end, being a patient consumer and going into a doctor's office and conveniently leaving out the fact that I have sex with men because I don't feel comfortable. My mission as a medical provider is to create that safe space and to say, look, it's okay to talk about anal sex. It's okay to talk about masturbation. It's okay to talk about hooking up. This is a safe space. You can bring your problems. If you can't talk about your health issues with your doctor or your medical provider, where can you talk about them? And why would you have to hide a certain aspect, a very important part of you being human? Sexuality is a huge component of being human. And we all fall somewhere in that continuum in terms of some people are very sexually active, other people don't want to have sex with anyone. So my job is to create that safe space. And I continue to do that. To answer your question more directly, Max, I continue to do that with COVID. This is a safe space. I'm protecting myself with PPE. I'm here to take care of you. I'm your medical provider. The game doesn't change. The actors might be a little bit different, or the circumstances might be a little bit different, but the situation is the same. My job as a healthcare provider is to take care of you, the patient. And that's really the bottom line. And I know that I can rely on myself to do that. I have the skill set.
That goes a long way. it goes long. You and I have talked, and even earlier today, we spoke about how uh, I was fortunate enough to provide HIV tests, free and
Hmm.
confidential HIV tests for a long time, and creating a space where folks can feel, that's really where I cut my teeth. But creating a space where people feel comfortable, where people feel like their information is going to be respected,
Yeah.
and where it could be a life altering situation for them to meet a stranger who's going to prick them on the finger and then tell them information that could alter the rest of their lives. That's significant. They're putting a huge amount of trust in my
Right.
hands. And so I wanted to, like, every time I wanted to honor that and create that space where they felt comfortable for such a situation to happen, you know? So I know what you mean. And that's something I've been able to tap into as well.
Hmm.
Lewis, I'd ask you the same, and really, you've given me a lot of beautiful golden nuggets in order to kind of like ask questions also. So I want to acknowledge that. Pero te quiero preguntar specifically, how have your life experiences before March helped you after March in a different way?
Yeah. So I what comes to my mind immediately is like I can hear my dad's voice, and he kind of saying, "You're a go-getter. You're a go-getter." And I kind of grew up thinking that about myself. I'm a go-getter, and what does that mean for me? Um, and for me, a go-getter is just someone who doesn't give up. Who's just persevering, kind of consistently looking and exploring. And so I think I've always had that drive in me to like grow and produce. And so when we were hit with this pandemic, survival kicks in, and all your skills, good and not good, maybe come up, and that came up for me. And I that same week, March was probably one of the busiest months that I saw the most high volume patients, and so having that desire to produce during this time and to kind of get work done, it doesn't it just keeps me and it drives me.
That's yeah. That I think that's much like I mentioned, the process of it's only really after the fact that we kind of like come to and realize I did all that. Wow. I think that when survival mode kicks, we're not thinking about what we're doing. It's kind of like muscle memory. We're just kind of like going with emotions and stuff. So I think much like that, that process ends up happening in many different ways throughout the day, the weeks, the months. And so just giving you a few moments, it's so important to me. Just giving you a few moments to celebrate yourself, celebrate what you're capable of, celebrate what you've been through. Um, it's a huge boost for me. Not just boost as far as confidence, but also I got to thank my network. I got to thank my support system. I got to thank the people who have made it easier for me to get through today. And acknowledging that I think is just so huge. So next question. Now I shared some questions with y'all, but I also didn't share everything. So I got to keep you on your toes a little bit, but it's gonna be free flowing and also it's okay. Also, I just want to acknowledge also that look, these are two-parter conversations. This is the English version, and there's going to be a Spanish version next week on Sunday at 1. And so it's okay. This is going to be an ongoing conversation. So it's okay to talk about ourselves as people because I think that that's how we create a container. That's how we're able to hold space for each other, so people can know who we are and why we're saying what we're saying. So I appreciate us bringing in our own personal histories into this because it makes it easier for understand where we're coming from. So my next question, which is very simple, is what? How has COVID or the situation since March? How has COVID caused you to feel comfortable in uncomfortable spaces? How have you forced yourself to go into uncomfortable spaces due due to this pandemic, due to the shifting circumstances? Maybe just a scenario where you have pushed yourself, where if it didn't happen, you wouldn't have pushed yourself. So I'm going to ask Jurg that first. Jurg, sorry.
Oh, okay. Um, so I can give you a scenario, and until 4 weeks ago, I was working in an urgent care in Waterbury. And because I work in the medical world, things are changing every day. The COVID pandemic is a moving target. The guidelines change every day. The recommendations change every day. So in early March, when all this happened, all of a sudden they decided that people weren't going to be coming into the building anymore, that we were going to assess everyone curbside. And of course, March in Connecticut is very unpredictable in terms of weather. So I'm wearing full PPE. I'm wearing a mask, I'm wearing goggles, and going out curbside in the pouring rain and assessing patients curbside, essentially in their car, doing physical exams, seeing them for things that are not related to COVID. And I'm thinking to myself, this is ridiculous. What? I didn't sign up for this. But you learn and adapt, and you keep yourself safe. And I look back on it now, and I think that was a good experience. That's something that I'll be able to talk about with friends and family in the future. That and I've learned some things in the process. People are scared. People are terrified. I had a 60-year-old man that I was assessing. He is the sole caregiver for his wife who has MS. And he was terrified that he had COVID and that he would bring it home to his wife. And he burst into tears in the parking lot. And so, I have to put my baggage aside, and I have to tend to him not only as a healthcare provider, but as a human being. Look, and acknowledge, look, I know you're scared. I'm scared too. I get it. So
yeah, I think that's
it's all about adapting.
Yes,
it's all about adapting.
Adaptable. That's huge. And I was going to touch on that later, but let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Yeah.
I wanted to, because that's the second part of the theme about dignity. But moving on, Maya, I wanted to ask you, because you're coming from more of a community voice, which is really important right now. And that's I think right now, the folks who are indoors wondering what's happening as far as where do they go, who to ask for to help, what links should they follow. Like, I think those kind of things are a little hard to be able to adjust to if we're talking about seasoned folks who may not necessarily know how to work a smartphone or a laptop. I think about them, if they're home alone and they need to access a conversation like this, say, I think about them too. So I guess my question is, in what ways you have noticed push yourself to be in uncomfortable spaces? That's the term I'm using, but I think you catch to something that you may not necessarily have done before, but you feel necessary to do now.
Yeah. So not only my political movement is what I've been trying to let people know who I am and what I stand for, but I've been using Facebook Live as a resource to communicate with folks who am connected with, whether if it's just a hi or a bye. But it's been very uncomfortable for me a little bit to be on Facebook Live, as in to talk about political things, because again, I don't know if I might say something and someone gets offended, or if I say something, then a debate begins. And, Facebook is kind of like a very, very funny social media kind of thing, because everyone can just I wouldn't say twist your words, but, just kind of like being very defensive. So I've been very cautious of what I say, how I do it, because I don't want to be that person to start a debate. And I sometimes don't like watching myself on video. That's one thing I don't like. So when I do post the video, I just watch a clip of it and then I'm like, okay, girl, you're done. So, but like you were saying though, there's a lot of people that don't have access to the internet or how to use a smartphone, because my grandma, to this day say, how do you do this? She would swipe up when she's supposed to swipe down, and so it's kind of something that really motivated me to really inform the community. What really, really frustrates me is I'm not able to door knock, because again, people are so terrified of COVID-19 that they don't know if I have it, even though I don't have the symptoms, or if the germs might be around. It's just very, very, very scary. But it frustrates me because how am I supposed to let my peoples know that I'm running for state rep, that I'm running to be their voice or have their voice be heard and carry that all the way to the Capitol? You know, how is that possible? So that kind of makes me uncomfortable, because it makes me feel like, either though people who are at the Capitol, what are they doing? They want to be seen because it's convenient for them to be seen when it's re-election season, you know? So that makes me feel a little uncomfortable, because again, state reps, I'm not saying all, but some of them could probably, you know, use it as their advantage to be on Facebook Live, or if they choose to be seen or whatever, but then they're really not doing things for their community or for their constituents. So, but what really pushed me is just keep informing people, use Facebook Live, use Instagram Live, YouTube, anything that people have access to for right now, like a screen. That's what I've been trying to, you know, accomplish. And so far, I've had some folks reaching out to me. I need help with this. I'm very happy to say I've helped someone, you know, give information so they can get their own apartment. It wasn't the same company, but they got an apartment. So I really, really am happy that I'm doing something on my end to help people, but it's not enough. But again, I'm just staying positive that we can, you know, be safe, but get this COVID-19 out of the way, because, you know, people need help. And, you know, that's something that I'm very passionate about. So I don't know if that answered the question, but
You touch on it. You touched on it. You hit it hard. I think that I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that. let me get the legalese out of the way. That New Haven Pride Center is a nonprofit, and as a nonprofit, we have to be very careful about supporting any specific, you know, politician or party.
oh yeah,
However, we can support initiatives. We can support bills. We can support things that specifically help our community and uplift the experiences our community needs to have in order to get our needs met. So that's why it was a lot of a reason why having you on to this call was so important to me, because you advocate for your community. You know, outside of being a politician, you advocate for your community, and so having you here as an advocate is significant for me. And frankly, it's I think as though that there's not enough political representation for our community, really.
mm-hmm.
And if there ever is, it's usually centered around, for lack of a better term, whiteness. It's usually centered around specific issues that really benefit a certain demographic. You know, so I think having an image, just an image about, you know, just the idea of thinking about you being in Hartford representing not just the trans community, not just the LGBTQ community, everyone who voted for and against you will be represented by you.
Absolutely.
So thinking about that is significant. That changes things for a lot of people psychologically. But yeah, I wanted to thank you for being, you know, for being here, and also just like, I can't thank you all enough. But Louis, what are the ways in which you have pushed yourself in uncomfortable situations? We talked a little bit about this earlier, but really, I'm excited to hear what you have to say. Go ahead. Hold up. I can't hear you just yet. There you go.
I was on mute, pardon. Yeah, this situation has affected all of us in many ways. And so when I think of that question, I'm thinking professionally, personally, you know, like in what context. So I'll just share both. In terms of working in a clinical setting, we've had to, of course, adapt to the use of telehealth, which is a kind of virtual way of conducting therapy with patients. And that was new. So just all sorts of practitioners and clinicians. And for myself, having to adapt to that, it's come with a lot of challenges and victories, or good things. Particularly just having to navigate technology when it's lagging, or adapt to the social etiquette of being online and that dynamic of interacting with the patient. It's different. You don't have that effective kind of physical component, but I find myself having to rely on a lot more of things like that I already relied on, but just I have to communicate that I'm relying, like that I'm looking at you, that I'm listening to you, you know, just very, very conscientious efforts surrounding social etiquette has been something that I've had to adapt to. But also personally, like you wake up in the morning and you're used to going to work. Now I wake up in the morning and I turn on, you know, just flip my laptop open and throw on a shirt, you know, and that routine has its pros and its cons as well. You know, being inside and I'm talking to like 10 people a day, you know, 13 people a day who are having reactions to COVID and other stressors, whether it was historical stress or just new stuff or a combination of everything together. And having to hear people's resiliency and stressors and challenges can also be costing to me. And I have to really pay attention to how I, you know, take care of myself and conscientiously do things for myself so that I don't find myself, like I said earlier, producing and at the end of the day, I'm not checked out. So that's been a big challenge for me, is finding that equilibrium on taking care of self and taking care of others at the same time.
Huge. I'm curious to ask you to like unpackage a little bit, because I've heard you talk about this and I'm not hearing enough people talk about it in terms of social etiquette online. Like, I get the feeling that a lot of us have been thrust into this telemedicine piece, have been thrust into, as Maya was saying, Facebook Live, but we may not necessarily know the do's and don'ts when it comes to telemedicine visit or a Facebook Live broadcast. Like, can you tell me a little bit more of what people are dealing with when it comes to certain things that they find that, wow, I can't believe they did that when I'm not cool with that, or I'm really glad they did that, I didn't know I could, like things like that. Like, have you found anything in terms of people's behavior online?
Yes, online you get to see a whole different world. You're not constrained to 4 walls in a room. You can actually see someone in their own ecology, and but how do you work with that and gather that information and observe and still remain socially etiquette or present or invested? And you know, I don't know what research says, simply because maybe there isn't research. I don't know what the do's and don'ts are as far as like how you should behave online. However, it's a conversation that I think we should have out loud, is acknowledging that this online way of interacting is completely different, and that there are ways and adaptations of having to show that you are listening or you know, present with the person. I haven't really figured out the do's and don'ts. I mean, you know, I'm just sitting with the question more so than anything else, is how do we talk about social etiquette versus what is the social etiquette? And that's kind of where I stand.
No, I hear you, and that's why I kind of like bring it up, or like, you know, reflect back, is because, like I said, I don't think too many folks are talking about this, and I bet more people are being affected by it than talking about it. So that to me feels like there's a bit of an imbalance there. Um, uh, uh, Anything that you'd like to add, Maya or Jurg, about this?
Yeah, I'd like to. There's a couple of things I'd like to add. One, just anecdotally, there was this incident of a weatherman who was broadcasting from home and had on a dress shirt and a tie, and decided not to wear any pants, and then it was revealed later on. So that's an extreme example of what not to do.
That's a don't. Okay, gotcha.
The other thing that, from personal experience, I had telemedicine is like Louis was saying, is a whole new world, and we are just beginning to tap into the incredible opportunity we have to reach people who normally don't want to come into clinic for various reasons, whether it be transportation or the stigma of living with HIV and not wanting to be seen in the clinic. Oh, I have to go to that place, and people are going to know that I'm there because of my HIV, et cetera, et cetera. So there is a silver lining in this, is what is basically my point. But also, I had a visit the other day, an online visit, a telemedicine visit with a patient, and we were talking about her medication, and she was telling me about her blood pressure medicine while she's puffing on a cigarette. And I kind of let it go because I thought, I'm not going to address it right now. But I was really kind of caught and thought, should I be addressing the fact that she's smoking during her medical visit, or should I just leave it alone? So my point is that it's a work in progress or in process. And so we're going to have to kind of discover over time what social etiquette is when you're using telemedicine, whether it be for therapy or for a medical visit, or whether you're trying to make a statement in terms of your advocacy work. So it's a work in progress.
No, that it is. I think that there's a lot of adjustments that we're going through, trying
Absolutely.
to figure. Like, that's why I asked the do's and the don'ts, because I'm asking for personal reasons, but I also imagine that I'm not the only one who's like wondering about these things. Like,
right.
Yeah, I see you as a like a hardcore community organizer, right? And I also come from that. So when I took on this job, Latinx program officer, I was gonna lean heavily on the face-to-face. That's where I, my magic happens, where I'm like face-to-face with you, and we can educate ourselves and be open and create spaces where we can get needs met and organize. But when this thing hit, it made me think, oh my gosh, like, how am I going to adjust to the new, I call it the new abnormal, but how am I going to adjust to the new abnormal in a way that I can still, do my magic, but also like allow a space where other folks can do their magic too, even though we're not face to face. Like, that's a real struggle as an organizer. For me, it is.
Right.
So go ahead. I'm listening. I was going to ask Maya, but go ahead, Jurg, and then we'll ask Maya.
Yeah, I have one more point to make, just in reference to what Louis was saying before. As a medical provider, I have to use more of my assessment tools just by observing that you normally would kind of take for granted in the exam room, and also the environment in which the person is communicating, whether it be their living room and the dog's barking and the kids are yelling. It gives you clues about what their daily life is like and how sometimes challenging it is. So you, as the provider, whether it be behavioral health or medical, have to use more of your assessment skills just by observation that you normally, I guess, in the exam room, it would be more a controlled environment. And sometimes with a telemedicine visit, it can be very chaotic because there's stuff going on in the background.
Thank you. Maya.
I'm still trying to process the question. Like, can you elaborate a little bit for me?
Yeah.
So
it's fair. I should clear it up. But how has organizing, community organizing, changed in a way for you where things have gotten perhaps easier or harder? Because I've had to adapt to not just doing online events like this, but also communicating with folks, checking in with folks. So how have you noticed community organizing being easier or harder?
it's like a mixture of both. It's kind of easy because everyone's on their phones now. So it's like, come on, what are you doing? Oh, I'm on my phone. So it's kind of like easy to communicate with those who are constantly on Facebook or texting emails. But what makes it hard is that would people respond, right? Like if you want to organize a certain thing, there's so many people, like so many advocates, so many community organizers that are doing amazing work that they're making a difference. But when you're trying to schedule, like, let's do a fundraiser for a certain thing to help feed people, right? It's kind of hard because what if that other person doesn't have enough time? Like their schedule is so busy that on their end, they're so like, amped with so many things to do, so many projects. And then my end is like, well, I'm kind of flexible, but what do I do on my end to make it happen? So it's kind of a mixture of both, but yet again, all of the frustrations or hard work or anything that we're trying to pull off, it happens. But I would just say, like, it's kind of hard doing community organizing when there's so many others that have so many projects, you know, piled on top of them.
Keeping track of that I probably set more Google Calendar events, invites in the last few months than I have in my entire life. And I've had a Google email for a long time. So I think that even though I am very kind of plugged in, I was plugged in for work. I was basically in the intersection of nonprofit work and social media. That's where you would find me. And so that means that when I left work, I turned things off. Home, right? And now I feel like, well, I'm home at work and there's no real boundary, right? There's no real boundary when I turn things on and off. And I feel like I'm more available now and also really busy now in a way that I wasn't before, and so also like working physically at a shelter and then coming home to do more work for the Pride Center, like you do end up having to find a balance. And it's the last question I'm going to ask, which is, how have you been able to take care of yourself? But I'll ask that at the end, because I think a lot of us are dealing with this right now. We want to be available. We want to be, available, but we also need to take care of ourselves. That's really important, and it's also easy to forget in the midst of all this chaos, in the midst of all this pain, challenges. It's easy to forget how much we matter too. So it's already 2:00, and I'm excited because I have more questions, and I was worried that I wasn't going to have enough questions, and I'm happy that the conversation is free flowing. And I also want to address that even though this conversation was specifically about folks who are trans and their health, folks who are detained and undocumented, queer folks who are detained, undocumented, and unemployed, like I said, this is an ongoing conversation, and I think it's important to build trust first, or at least a sense of holding space before we begin to talk about the things that I think really do matter. And all of it matters, in my opinion. I'm just saying that I want you to get to know us because this is an ongoing conversation. So moving on, I'm going to ask you, Jurg, that we had a conversation earlier today about this, and I really want to like flesh this out a little bit more. That like I mentioned, I worked in an AIDS services organization, and I'm familiar with stigma. As an HIV positive man myself, since 2012, I have felt stigma in different degrees, professionally, personally, and I've understood it to be something coming out of ignorance, but also out of pain. There's pain there, and so that's why I'm a little bit more understanding than most folks. But still, I get very angry when somebody else is dealing with stigma than when I personally do. But I think that's just mostly just like a nature kind of thing. But my question is this: I have serious concerns about the ignorance surrounding COVID-19. We don't know enough about it to be able to, basically say how we should treat people who are positive. And I'm seeing parallels between folks who are HIV positive and the stuff that they had to deal with back in the 80s and 90s. And I'm seeing that ignorance today in the way that we treat people who are COVID-19 positive. And I'm very concerned about that. I'm feeling that there's this sense of solidarity that I feel with them because I know that stigma. I know what it's like to be treated differently because somebody doesn't know enough about a disease or a virus. I know what that's like, and I wouldn't want anybody to deal with that. So my question is, having done this work for as long as you have, not as long, but as deeply as you've been delving into it, having done this work, do you think that there is this sense of frustration among folks who are COVID-19 that you have been seeing positive that reflects among those who are HIV positive as well?
I think there are some differences. The biggest difference being that COVID is somewhat limited in terms of you get a COVID diagnosis and you self-quarantine for 2 weeks, and then you can essentially go about your business. So there is a bit of a difference that way. The bottom line really is, though, is that, I mean, I think back to the early days of HIV, and I'm assuming I'm the oldest person here. I remember the very early days of HIV and AIDS, back in the early 80s when they didn't even know what to call it. And it really was a stigma. There was no health care for people with AIDS. People who were gay and part of the community were still marginalized for their sexual orientation and their gender identity. So I remember those days, and they were awful, and people died alone, shunned by their families. And that was a terrible time. And many, many people died. I had friends who died. So there is, I mean, the bottom line really is, though, is that we as a society need to educate ourselves. Like I was saying earlier, COVID is kind of a moving target. If you think back to, if I think back to early March, when there were the first few people in the US who were diagnosed with COVID, and there were numerous articles in the New York Times about some of the symptoms, and still the symptoms are changing. Within the past week, we've had discussions, or there's been articles about this new multi-organ inflammatory syndrome that has been found in children related to COVID, which opens up a whole new set of questions in terms of what to do with these kids and how to keep them safe and how to keep them from dying. Back in March, there was an article about what was happening, what doctors were seeing in Italy. And Italy, of course, as you know, was hard hit by COVID. And one of the symptoms that they found early on was that people lost their sense of taste and smell. And soon, maybe 3 weeks later, we started seeing that here. I actually had a patient, her only symptom was that she had lost her sense of taste and smell. So my point is that it's a moving target. We're discovering new things about this virus every single day. As of late, we found that people can be positive for a long time, but be completely asymptomatic after they've been diagnosed. So who's to say that in a month from now, the CDC may decide, or the World Health Organization may decide that, well, maybe 2 weeks isn't long enough to isolate ourselves. So there are a lot of unanswered questions. And as you all know, there's still no treatment, despite what some people may be promoting in terms of treating or preventing COVID. There's no research to back that up.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. No, go ahead. I'm listening.
Yeah. So to go back to your original question, is there some stigma? Yeah, there probably is. But the bottom line really is we need to educate ourselves, and we need to find evidence-based, reliable information to make our decisions about our health and about our community. But really, the bottom line is about taking care of each other as humans and being respectful and wearing a mask and washing your hands and keeping each other safe. That's really what it's about. And it doesn't have to be a political divide because of that. We all want the same thing. We want safety for ourselves and our family. We want a roof over our head. We want food on the table. We want to feel safe, and we want to go about our lives and live happily ever after, if that's possible. So regardless of what side of the aisle you're on, we all want the same thing. Our goals are all the same, okay? It just boils down to where are we getting our information from. And as a healthcare provider, I would encourage people or recommend people to get reliable evidence-based information to make their decisions.
Yeah, I think that since being at home more often than we usually are,
Right.
and also even bringing it into the political realm, that if people are going to start getting ballots at home, then that means they'll have an opportunity to look at people's names and research who they are and what they stand for. And so that's a benefit that I see. Mm-hmm. Trying to find a silver lining, and
another also, silver lining. Yeah.
Another benefit is that we're at home more often, so we can research these things. Granted, there's a lot of information out there, a lot of it saying many different things, but I think that eventually, when you hear so much is fast changing, that eventually you hear, you know what, this outlet did not BS me, or this reporter has been consistent, so I'm going to go to this reporter. Eventually, you begin to develop an analysis of who you give your attention to. At least that's the way I've been able to do it. And so doing that process personally for yourself in your home, huge. Education, huge. And of course, being open is also going to be really important. So I'm going to ask, Luis, te voy a preguntar something in particular, unless you wanted to add something regarding that conversation regarding stigma.
Well, as I was hearing it, what was coming to my mind was just another example of how discrimination and stigma are happening with respect to like certain groups of people, not just who are diagnosed with COVID or folks who have HIV, but also our dear folks in Chinatown who are facing some discrimination and just very uh, bizarre kind of treatment from other people. And as we were talking about that this particular group of people came to mind, and I wanted to acknowledge that there's other people too who are, I'm sorry, there are different groups of people who are affected in different ways.
Thank you for mentioning that. That's also something that about a week after this hit, I made a point to go to every Chinese spot, near to my area or Pan Asian, and post that I was there, kind of like showing a sense of support to them. And I was surprised by the kind of responses I got. So what you're saying is it's significant. There's an undergirding feeling there. But the question I wanted to ask though was, how have you seen mental health becoming an issue for not just specifically the trans community, but how have you seen mental health become an issue that is not being addressed the way you would think it would? I guess what I'm saying is that we're not talking about mental health as much as I thought we should be in a situation like this. Have you noticed that among the people you're talking to as well?
Here's how I'll answer that question. I don't know if I'm going to answer it directly, but I do feel a little alone sometimes in this work. And it's just by nature of being so enclosed, right, for so long. And that's been something to deal with.
How have you noticed that? Like, how have you noticed? Have you noticed people's reactions coming to you, and expressing their feelings in a way? Have you noticed that being an easier process for them to do or harder?
Yeah, well, I'll share with you my senses on how I'm observing mental health during this pandemic. I do see that there are, in my experience, for an example, folks with PTSD, folks who already had some pre-existing stuff or trauma or symptoms. You definitely see like there's different ways I've seen people, but a lot of folks, their mental health is like really like chronically, anxious and or depressed or just facing different symptoms. There are a group of people though who I am seeing with very similar set of conditions who have maybe been through some trauma or adversities, and this has been like the best thing that has happened to them. Or for someone who has like social anxiety and they're very comfortable with social distancing. And so it's hard to generalize and kind of say how mental health is being shaped by the pandemic, but you do see like a wide range of people either regressing and kind of re-experiencing a lot of symptoms, or folks who are like taking this as an opportunity and just using it to work to their advantage.
Yeah, that's a phenomenon I've been seeing, I've been feeling, doing, and also seeing in other folks as well. Did you want to add anything to that, Jurg or Maya, in terms of mental health? Go ahead, Maya.
Yeah. So this is interesting because I should have mentioned about mental health, because one, I have a therapist and I see my therapist when I need to, because I want to practice how to use my strengths, as in like if something traumatic is happening, how do I do it without having someone telling me, right? So especially with this COVID-19, so I literally was unemployed March 14th or the 15th, and I never thought that my job would have to temporarily shut down, because we're also a nonprofit. So I work at Real Artways in Hartford. We're a nonprofit. We are I love my job. because, you know, it gives me the opportunity to talk to people, again, educate people about what we are, what we stand for. We're a movie theater, basically, but also we're an art gallery, we're a community space. So it's like a lot of things that people can come to our space feeling safe, comfortable, and, you know, getting to know people. So we had shut down because of COVID-19, and who wants to come see a movie knowing that there's so many people coming in and out of the theater? So I never thought that that would affect my income, as in, oh my God, my cable, or grandma needs $20, here's $20, or, you know, how do we keep our families moving forward, especially going through dark times? So unemployment, you know, filing for unemployment, I literally waited for 2 months. And so if it wasn't for Jeff Curry, who's the state rep, I believe the 11th district, I could be wrong, but amazing state rep. He's the only state rep that really reached out to me. Okay. Like, my state rep in the 3rd district is nowhere to be seen. And obviously she knows I'm her challenger. So she wants nothing to do with me, but it's not about her. It's about us. Right. So like, it really affected my mental health, because I thought, wow, I'm a political candidate. I'm trying to run for office. But how do I really challenge a question to people in the community, knowing that I'm running for this position? Because I'm trying to keep a clean reputation, but also I want to be vocal about this issue. How does the state of Connecticut want to help the majority of the whole state, for those who are unemployed, if they're making this process harder for us? So my PTSD started kicking in. I started thinking about my past and this and that. So I really thought, oh my God, what do I do? So not only that COVID-19 is affecting our health, mental health is also a huge thing, a huge role that's affecting all of us. Staying in my house, in my room, as you see, it really kind of makes me want to bite my nails, because what am I supposed to do? I'm unemployed right now, temporarily. I'm trying to run for office, but then again, it's hard to canvas, phone bank when we're all doing Zoom. So it really was affecting my mental health. But then I really decided to just meditate more, Zoom call people you love, go on Facebook Live, joke around, you know, spread the love. But I never thought that COVID-19 would affect my mental health. And so doing these kind of things, and also doing telehealth with my therapist, really helped me. But yeah, it's not fun when you're in a position where you're vulnerable, you know, so it's very hard. But, you know, I just thought, like, wow, I never thought it would deal with the mentality too. So it's very interesting.
Maya, you're just not alone. Like, thank you for sharing that. You know, I appreciate your input. It sounds like you're making it work for you. But it's a big challenge for all of us, whether you're a clinician or not a clinician. It's like we're all facing this change and having to adapt to this change, and it is costing here and here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it's an adjustment, and watching each other do it gives me a sense of, like, what, listening to you, Maya, like, gives me a sense of inspiration. But also watching other folks do it, it just makes me feel like, well, you know, this is a challenge we're all dealing with together. So it gives me a sense of solidarity. It makes it easier to get through. But Jurg, did you want to add to that too?
Yeah, I see it as a two-sided coin, or a double-edged sword, or whatever the analogy is. That yes, we all need to take care of ourselves, regardless of whether you're a clinician or your line of work is something else. We all have to take care of ourselves. And my guess would be that none of us in the world is sleeping very well these days, and we're all dealing with the worries of financial issues and keeping the lights on, and going to the grocery store induces anxiety for a lot of people, because you're putting yourself at risk. So we're all dealing with the same thing. The flip side of that is it gives us an opportunity as humans, as community members, regardless of what that community is, to reach out to each other and say, hey, are you okay? Is there anything I can do for you? Do you want to just chat for a while? What I've been doing is I've reached out to friends via FaceTime and Zoom, and we've done cocktail hour you know, and it doesn't have to be alcohol. It can just be, we're going to have some nachos and we're going to talk to each other. And I've connected with people I haven't talked to in a long time. So it's been a way for me to take care of myself, but also to reach out to my community. And the community doesn't have to be in your own backyard. I talk to people in California. I talk to people in Europe. You know, another silver lining, I would argue, is that it helps us to build a virtual community so that we take care of each other and just reach out. So important.
That is so important. I'm just picking up, making sure nobody wanted to say anything, because we have a couple questions I wanted to get to. But Maya, did you want to say something? Go ahead.
Yeah, when Erg had literally, it's just very, very short and simple. It's so true that not only COVID-19 really made a huge impact to our country, but it's really, really, like, it's kind of, it's like, I'm kind of nervous to say it, but I'm going to say it. I'm kind of glad that COVID-19 happened in a way that it made me connect with someone. Okay. Like I'm a mother in the LGBTQ community. So, like, you know, I can't have children of my own, and I've always wanted to be a mom. So I have someone who's very close to me, and I really wasn't communicated to that person, but having to have, you know, COVID-19 to happen, it really got me closer with this person. I'm very thankful because, you know, again, it deals with my mental health. I'm very antisocial, and it's actually helped me become more social, especially going through this tough time. It's kind of weird to say that I'm glad it happened, but I'm like, at the same time, I'm not happy with that we're going through this dark time, but it's really gotten me close with people. So I really agree with Erg. I just wanted to point that out.
No, I appreciate you mentioning that, because there is, and I know how, like, it may hit the ear harsh, because there's where I have said myself, you know what, if it wasn't for my HIV diagnosis, I don't think I would have, there wouldn't have been a fire lit under me in order to get my life together. The diagnosis was the thing that sparked my life into being where I am today, to serve and also be, you know, be celebrated for who I am despite my diagnosis. So I can relate. Sometimes I've said my diagnosis has been a blessing for me, right? For me, and so that's so I can relate with what you're saying. But let me just get to one quick question real quick that somebody asked. And it's a really good one. So I'll say it and then repeat it again. What do you view as shared cultural values among the Latinx community that is helping them cope with the pandemic and resist the negative effects of stigma on their health? The pandemic has only exacerbated episodes of xenophobia, of nationalism, and, for example, as undocumented immigrants and migrants have been attacked and hard hit by this pandemic. So the question is, what do you view as shared cultural values among the Latinx community that is helping them cope with the pandemic and resist the negative effects of stigma on their health? I'll just give a brief answer myself, in the sense that, you know what, for a long time I used to say that we are all we need, and that we can provide enough for ourselves, where we don't need to depend outside of us, you know, and I've used that in different contexts. But here's a scenario where I have seen groups of folks get together, whether it's a mutual aid, whether it's a Connecticut bail fund, I've seen folks get together in ways that kind of like put this language into practice, that we are all we need. You know, that we're not, a lot of folks who are undocumented are not going to be receiving a stimulus check. So how are they going to pay their rent? Well, we created a cancel rent was created in order to, like, look for the needs of these people to get met, things like that. So the way I would answer the question is, I've been amazed to see people give credence, give value to myself in the past, having heard and repeated, we are all we need. It's an amazing thing to see. And it fills me with so much inspiration and encouragement that I appreciate the question. So going in order of Jurg, Maya, and Luis, how would you answer the question? Which again is, let me repeat, what do you view as shared cultural values among the Latinx community that is helping them cope with the pandemic and resist negative effects of stigma on their health?
I would say that this pandemic has brought some of the best out in people and some of the worst out in people. So You just have to focus on the good. There is good out there if you look for it. I can't speak to what is happening in my community in terms of where I work because I've only been there 4 weeks, but I have seen people reach out to needy families and provide rental assistance or food or Walmart cards. So there is help out there. You kind of have to look for it, but it's there, and people really want to assist. I guess the comforting or the comforting thought is that we're all in the same situation. We're all struggling. There is no one, I would argue, in the greater community of whether that's globally or in this country or in Connecticut that has not been affected by this in some fashion. And so we can all, there's a commonality in all of this that we can all relate to. So I don't know if that answers the question, but that's my best shot.
No, I got you. I hear you. Go ahead, Maya. Thank you.
So again, just going by, my community, it's just so beautiful to see people come together. And especially in my district, it's predominantly Latinx. And it's just amazing to see that everyone's coming together. I know there's a Hartford Mutual Aid that, again, they've been doing phenomenal work to really provide food for those who are not only in need, but also who need that extra, food in their pantry. It's really beautiful to see. I have tried to get more involved with that because it's kind of inspiring, there are really, really good people out there that really want to help their community. Because I know a lot of folks that say, oh, the government doesn't care about us. They just want us to rot. They just want us to struggle. But really the people who work in the government, Councilwoman Wodelis Bermudez, Josh Mitchell, and many other folks that I can say have been doing amazing work. And I give them a shout out because again, they're in it to win it, but also really giving back to the community. Yeah, I mean, there's so many things I can say, but it's really beautiful to see that my own people are really there, and I look forward to connecting with them soon. And, even if the work is, done or not, again, I'm willing to really help and give back because it's just awesome to see. I'm very grateful for people like that. And again, there's so much more work to do. And yeah, I don't know what else to say.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you though, because that's something that we need to acknowledge. The good work that people are doing. We have a tendency by we. Let me use I statements. I have a tendency to focus on the negative sometimes, kind of critical. So I think being able to having a voice that'll say, "Hey, this is going on too," is really important. So I want to appreciate you for bringing that energy in.
Yeah, I just echo what the other panelists are saying as far as what it means to come together. I think that traditionally speaking, Latin cultures can be seen as a collectivist culture, meaning like we operate together, we do things together, our tribes, we raise our kids together. And so to be able to see that happening in different ways, for an example, like where I work at, it was very nice to see that they were actually delivering groceries, particularly to the patients who tested positive for COVID. And I thought that was a very nice example of using using it as an opportunity to just address those needs.
Many examples like that. I can tell you alone, working at the shelter, the amount of folks that come through with handmade masks and food, it really is hard. Like, it's hard not to cry, even now I get little. It really is so reassuring to know that good people really trying their best to not just look out for other folks, but really kind of like provide opportunities for each other. That's amazing to me. And it shouldn't surprise us, but it's nice when it does happen, So there is one more question I wanted to get to because I know it's 2:30 and I want to respect people's times. But there was a comment that was made, and I think it's really important to address. Is as it has been discussed, the pandemic is disproportionately impacting LGBTQ plus communities, communities of color, and folks of Latinx experience. I would like to hear more about how the panelists have seen social determinants of health, such as access to housing, food security, and financial stability, playing a role in the disparities within the COVID-19 pandemic. So there's a lot there, but I think that's something that at least should be touched on. So I'm going to repeat that once more, and then go to the panelists. As it has been discussed, the pandemic is disproportionately impacting LGBTQ plus communities of color and folks of Latinx experience. I would like to hear more about how the panelists have seen social determinants of health, such as access to housing, food, and financial stability, playing a role in the disparities within the COVID-19 pandemic. I know I've been picking on you, Jurg, but I wanted to get to you first, and you let me know what you think, please.
I have seen some of this already at working for an FQHC, which stands for Federally Qualified Health Center, which is where Louis and I work, excuse me. So by definition, a federally qualified health center gets government funds to take care of the community. So by definition, anyone can come to our clinic for services regardless of ability to pay. That is the definition of an FQHC. So just in the short time that I've been there, there have been, going back to what you were saying, Max, about masks, we got a whole box of masks that somebody made for our patients with HIV. We had goodie bags that we would give out to our patients with hand sanitizer and a gift card for groceries, face masks, and there's a couple of other things that are really, really generous in terms of, not generous in terms of what we're giving, but just things that people need right now. That, I mean, hand sanitizer alone is worth its weight in gold. If any of you have gone to the grocery store and tried to find hand sanitizer, good luck. It's impossible to find it. So, there has been. My point is that there's been an outreach, and and the community has come together by giving back, which is really, it's hugely important. It's taking care of the community. So I think our clinic, it will continue to be a very, very important resource to keep things going in terms of health, in terms of behavioral health, in terms of helping with food insecurities and being able to pay your electric bill and your gas bill and so forth.
Thank you. Yeah, that's important to know about. You know, what exists, what doesn't exist, and whatever exists, who to ask, how to access. Yeah, that's important.
Yeah.
Maya?
Yeah. There we go. Mute, unmute. So, that's really a good question. So what I can say on my end is, which my favorite word is, accountability. Hold your leaders accountable. They are responsible for our lives because we vote them in for a reason, because they have the knowledge, they have the power, although they may not have authority or power on certain areas that we may think what certain leaders do, but we have to hold them accountable. There should be no excuse. When it comes to housing, again, we need to really find a creative way. How do we make housing accessible to people who are in need? I hate to say that I'm still seeing gentrification happening in my area, and that gentrification still exists. So that's really is an issue. For my undocumented peoples, like mi gente, you know what I'm saying? It's just like, when are we going to understand that we need to help each other? With these detention centers, having them be, trying to find the words, like having them pushed into a fence-looking cage, knowing that this COVID-19 is happening. Again, people are not caring. You know what I'm saying? We need to fight for them. We really, really need to fight for them, because that's our job. That's my responsibility is to represent them and help them, because at the end of the day, they need all the love and you know, the respect that they deserve. Again, with Hartford Mutual Aid has been doing phenomenal work with, you know, giving food for those who are kind of struggling with getting like EBT assistance. And so if you can't donate, find a creative way to give back. If it's like a roll of toilet paper or a bag of chips, or, you know, create a pantry and just, you know, knock on your neighbor's door and say, hey, you know, I know this is not something you're used to, having your neighbor ask what you need, but honestly, what do you need? I feel like we need to do that more often. And it's just, again, holding people accountable. That's all I can say, because if we don't hold them accountable and our voices are not being heard, we're never going to change and we're never going to progress to move forward. So
Thank you. That's after you get elected, I'm going to remember that you mentioned that you wanted to be held accountable. So
yeah, please
I'll bring it
question
right
me.
back to you.
I mean, use your voice, because I actually had someone question me and they said, oh, well, she's now running for office, right? And so she's using the LGBTQ community as like a way to get the votes. Yeah, question me. Thank you for questioning me. This is something that I need to know. I need to get used to, because at the end of the day, there's no perfect politician. There's no perfect politician. Politics can get very dirty, but if you question me and you hold me accountable, then I'm going to stay woke. I'm going to stay in my line, like, oh wait, I mentioned this, but I forgot about it. Yeah, you know, question people, because if you don't question them, they might forget about you, and then they'll just like keep going. You know, they will just keep going, and I don't know. There's just like, that's important.
No, it's challenging our leaders is something that I feel like it should be just as compulsory as washing your hands.
Yeah.
It should be just as knee jerk. Challenging our leaders is something that needs to happen often. And I consider myself a leader too, so hold me accountable as well. I think that's really important, and I'll keep saying that, even though sometimes I regret it. But Louis, if you can let me repeat it once more, and it'll be the last question because we're already past the 2:30 mark. And
hey, Max, I read it a couple of times to make
oh,
sure.
you did? Go ahead, then you're good.
Yeah, honestly, you know, social determinants was already a struggle for our community to begin with. And so as the systems have to, you know, the housing and food pantries and those systems have to kind of renegotiate how they provide services, it does kind of further perplex our patients, you know, having to wait a little bit more to find out that they're on a waiting list, or hearing that their pantry is not open the third Saturday of the month. And so we continue to see that social determinants is real, and that it happens. But we also see that those needs are being met both by our leaders and by the community. And to Mia's point, I really appreciate that when you talk about accountability, if we can just do that with each other and keep each other kind of take care of one another, I think that really makes going through this pandemic a little bit smoother.
Alrighty, Jurg, did you want to?
If I could just add one more thing, one more comment to just kind of bring it full circle. It also has to do with preserving each other's dignity, you know?
Thank you. Yes, I think that's so important. I think that's the reason why I want to include that piece. Thank you for that. It's because I think that right now, because we're making so many sacrifices, that along the way, people's dignity could be lost. Oh, well, I'm used to having it this way. I guess I'm not going to have it this way. And a little bit of humanity is taken away there. And you know what? Dignity does not have to be lost. Right. Yes, we're dealing with the pandemic, but that does not mean that you're less human or that you need to be treated less human.
Right. And also having to ask for help for some people is huge. It's a huge step to have to take and say, look, I'm struggling. I really need help. And to be receptive and say, I can help you. I got you.
Yeah.
That's hugely important.
Like sometimes. But when we say dignity, can we just define that and what it means to like preserve dignity?
Yeah, I think that for me, dignity is really kind of like a sense of humanity, a sense of I'm a person, and my personhood should be respected for simply being a person. Yes, I'm a client. Yes, I'm a resident, or yes, I'm an individual that receives services, I'm a consumer, but that does not mean that my dignity needs to be sacrificed in order for me to receive the services that I need in order to get my needs met. So for me, dignity really is like a sense of respect. And I get the feeling, and working at the shelter, I see this firsthand, that there are people whose dignities are being um, are not being held up as they should be. You know, you're here and you're here because you need to be, so you put up with whatever, you know, whatever we tell you to put up with, and that's not dignified. You know, that's not, people shouldn't have to deal with that. And so that's basically the definition I'm bringing into the conversation. But I wanted to flesh it out a little more. It is past 2:30, and I wanted to thank you all so much for being part of this conversation. This is an ongoing conversation. If we didn't touch on the topics that folks wanted us to, like I said, this is ongoing, and establishing it to me was more fundamentally important than touching on every topic we could. So I wanted to thank you all. Mia, thank you so much for your passion, Jurg, for your experience, and Louis for all the nuggets of wisdom that you've given me leading up to this, and for also like coming out and doing this in a way that made me feel empowered to do this as well. So thank you so much. I'm going to be asking you to come back. I know that. So I'm holding you accountable to it. But also,
Yes.
I want to thank you all for being here. Thank you so much. And I look
Thank
forward
you.
to having more conversations like this.
Thank you for having us.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you.
Until next time, be well. Hasta luego. All right. I don't know how to turn this off.